Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me at lunchtime on a Monday to learn about our district's funding, how we're funded, and what challenges we're facing right now. I greatly appreciate it. All right, here's what you can expect from today's forum. We have 1 hour together today. I'm going to present for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and then I'm going to open it up to you for questions. When it comes time for questions, you can raise your hand using Zoom and we can unmute you, or you can use the Q&A box that will be on display. If you choose to raise your hand, we'll call on you when it's your turn to ask your question. I want to make sure that I can answer as many of your questions as possible today. And I do want to thank you all again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to me talk about our school district and our funding needs and challenges. It goes to show just how incredibly dedicated our community is to our children. Okay, so with no further ado, let's get started. So I always start this discussion with putting Douglas County School District in context. Our school district is very, very large. A lot of people do not realize the scope of Douglas County schools and what we do. Douglas County schools consist of 89 schools over about 844 square miles. So we have many programs and schools throughout Douglas County. I could not be more proud of every single one of them. Our fiscal year 21 revenue was $640 million. So that's almost $750 million in mostly taxpayer money that Douglas County School District uses to support our 64,000 children. So we're responsible for educating 64,000 students. Approximately 75% of our families choose a neighborhood school, and approximately 25% of our families choose a charter school. We have in recent years experienced some declining enrollment, but we know from looking around us and from our predictions that growth is coming, and certainly growth in certain pockets of our community. It's hard to look around or drive around Douglas County without seeing new houses and new developments going up. Finally, our school district has 8,600 employees. This means you can hardly go to King Soopers or to a restaurant without running into people who work for our amazing school district and do great work for our kids every day. This makes us the largest employer in Douglas County, with Charles Schwab coming in at second, somewhere around 4,700. So we're a very large employer and a very large part of this community. In terms of what our school district offers for our children, of course, we run our K-12 schools and handle our K-12 education. We offer special education services for preschoolers, as well as for young adults from 18 to 21. We make sure that we have programs for all of our kids, regardless of what their needs are. We offer incredible pathway opportunities to our students to make sure that then when they leave our system, they have incredible success. So what do we want for our students as a community? Of course, we want Douglas County School District to always be a destination district. What I mean by that is we want Douglas County School District to be known throughout the state and throughout the country as somewhere that teachers want to come locate so they can work here, and that families want to come locate so they can send their kids to school here. We want to make sure this is the greatest place to work and go to school. We certainly want to make sure that all of our children are set up for success in their futures when they go through our system. Whether they are heading to college, we have incredible college preparatory programs. Whether they're heading directly to a career out of high school, we have amazing pathways for all of our students to make sure that they get an industry certification, get the head start that they need to be able to go directly into a career instead of just a job. We also want to make sure that we're providing a pathway for those who want to go to the military or those who are working on life skills. We want to make sure that we're creating a pipeline for local industry. Many of our kids will settle right here in Douglas County. My parents lived in Douglas County for many years. My family has been in Douglas County for 22 years. My children grew up here, and I hope someday that my kids will want to settle here and live here with their families. This is a wonderful, wonderful place to live. And the school district is so much a part of making sure that we're creating that pipeline so that our kids can see success right here in Douglas County for the industries that we have here. And of course, we want to make sure that every single one of our schools is a point of pride in our community. Whether you send your children to schools or not, I am now an official 70%er who no longer has children in our school system and still lives here in Douglas County. My 3 children are all in college now. So I'm officially in that 70%. We want to make sure that the 70% still are really, really proud of our school district and really understand what we're doing and see the benefit for our entire community. What we want for our kids is very common among all of us. So what do we need to do? Well, let's talk about some of the challenges that we're facing. We're facing 2 major challenges right now. One is around competitive compensation and the other is around growth. On the competitive compensation side, we are struggling to pay particularly our educators, but truly all of our staff, competitive with the market around us. What you see here on this graph is our average educator pay. Back in 2008, 2009, Douglas County is the red dotted line. You can see that we were paying approximately right in the middle of the pack. Today, our average teacher salary is lower than the districts around us, causing significant competitive pressure for us and making it really, really difficult for us to attract and retain our amazing employees. We're going to talk a little bit about how we find ourselves in this situation and why that is financially. The other big challenge that we are facing is making sure that we continue to accommodate growth and maintenance of our buildings. As we are seeing growth throughout our county, we know that it is time for us to build some new elementary schools to accommodate our newer communities. We also have to be able to continue to take care of the school buildings that we already have. And we'll talk in more detail about what that looks like in terms of funding and how that works under the law. Which leads me to how are school districts funded? It's very counterintuitive how school districts are funded. And this is the #1 thing I hope you're able to take away from today. Under the School Finance Act, which was passed in 1994, the state legislature sets total program funding for each school district each year. So our total program funding, think of it that as our bucket. Our bucket is set by the state legislature each and every year. School districts are funded by a combination of local property tax and state general fund, which is income tax and sales tax. Local property taxes alone do not fully fund schools. So our fixed bucket that was fixed by the legislature is first filled with local property tax. And then the state general fund fills in the difference to get to the top of the bucket. What this means is when we collect more locally, as we are right now, because property values are up, more houses are going up, more school taxes are being collected locally. As we collect more locally, it simply means that the state fills in less. The size of the bucket does not change. This is very different from other entities that are supported by local taxes, such as libraries, our county, our municipalities. When we raise more tax locally, those organizations have more revenue to work with to meet the priorities of taxpayers. The school district simply gets less from the state so that there is no change to our total bucket, even as taxes locally, more taxes are collected due to prosperity in the county. This is the #1 misconception about how our schools are funded. So how can we impact the size of our bucket? The way that we can impact our bucket size is through a local mill levy override. A mill levy override allows us to actually increase the size of our bucket by up to 25%. So under the law, up to 25% additional funding can be raised at the will of local taxpayers through a mill levy override. Thanks to the generosity of our taxpayers in Douglas County, we have passed mill levy overrides over the years, and we are currently sitting at about 12% of an increase in our bucket size based on our current mill levy override. The challenge we're facing is our competitor districts are either near or at the full 25% increase based on their current mill levy overrides. This is what is putting us at such a competitive disadvantage. For example, as I mentioned, our current mill levy override allows our bucket to be 12% larger. Cherry Creek School District, right over the line, and that's where we lose a lot of our educators to, their bucket has been increased by the full 25% by their mill levy override. That makes for a significant difference, and it makes it really hard to be competitive with the districts around us in terms of average teacher pay. Those mill levy overrides are used for ongoing expenditures, such as salaries and operations. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mill levy override and what that means. This is the history of mill levy overrides in our area, at least looking back to 2011. Douglas County School District's mill levy override, this is in dollars per student. Douglas County School District's mill levy override is the red line on the bottom. You can see in 2018, our mill levy override got a significant boost thanks to our taxpayers. But you can also see during that course of time that other school districts also received additional mill levy override dollars, such that today the gap is much wider than it was in 2011. Now, again, they're limited to that 25% cap, so this trend should not continue quite like this, but we need to find a way to be able to close this gap in order to pay our educators more competitively. So for example, with the example of Cherry Creek, if we received the same mill levy override dollars per student, it would equate to $94 million more a year. This is where we can't pay competitively. $94 million is a lot to try to be able to make up for. And that is where our biggest challenge is in terms of competitive pay. It isn't how the State School Finance Act works. It's really that difference in mill levy override between us and other school districts. So going back to the competitive pay issue, you can see here that our average teacher salary as of last year is $57,919, according to the Colorado Department of Education. Cherry Creek's average teacher salary is $76,000. That means that there's about an $18,000 difference. That's where we're really struggling. The people in our classrooms that are delivering an awesome education to our children every day, they are critical. Even just telling a story about my own daughter who graduated from one of our amazing high schools. She was inspired by one of our pathways in that high school around biotechnology. That pathway was designed by former biologists who joined our school as teachers. And they designed this incredible program. My daughter had the ability to splice DNA, have access to CRISPR technology. She was able to work with researchers from the University of Virginia. They did incredible things for opportunities for high school students. So much so that she just finished her freshman year in bioengineering in college. We could not be more proud of her, but she was inspired to do that through her wonderful education in Douglas County schools, but not only through the ability to access that pathway, but also through the actual humans who deliver that incredible education. And it is those actual humans that we need to be able to pay competitively to hold on to. I do not want to lose them to Cherry Creek School District. It isn't just our teachers. It's also our support staff. Our education assistants, for example, they work often one-on-one with our students with special needs or assisting our schools and our students in many ways. They can go to Chick-fil-A or Starbucks and make far more money. We're struggling to be competitive with all of our support staff, from custodians to bus drivers to security specialists and our wonderful education assistants. So this is a challenge for us across the board, not just with teachers. So how does capital funding work? Everything I've talked about so far has been about operational funding. The School Finance Act is all about operational funding, and the Levy override is about operational funding. Capital funding is how we build schools, and that's how we maintain schools. The law contemplated that capital funding, so building and maintaining schools, is up to the local community, in the same way that we're responsible for building the libraries that we want and the other infrastructure that we want for our Douglas County community. We as a community are responsible for building and maintaining our schools. And we do that through a taxpayer approved bond election. So basically a bond is when the taxpayers vote positively on a bond. They are allowing the school district to take out a loan on behalf of the taxpayers, where the taxpayers pay the mortgage, and the school district is able to use that loan in order to build new facilities for our kids or invest in our existing buildings, or some combination of both. That capital maintenance money is something that we will always require in order to take care of all the capital infrastructure that the school district has accumulated over the years to educate our children. This graph here shows you a little bit about how the bonds have passed over the years here in Douglas County to pay for our amazing schools and continue to maintain them. Because we went from 2006 to 2018, that really long period of time, without the ability to invest in our buildings to take care of critical maintenance needs like HVAC units, roofs, carpet, all of the major maintenance that's required on buildings over the years. We deferred all of that maintenance for an entire decade without capital funding to be able to take care of it. Thanks to our taxpayers, we passed a bond in 2018, and we have been able to take care of all of that maintenance that was deferred for a decade. So now we've got the roofs and the HVAC units and the carpets that our schools so desperately needed. However, the last time we constructed a new neighborhood school was in 2010. With all of the growth going on around us, we very desperately need to accommodate that growth with some new neighborhood schools. And so that's one of our challenges. As a district, we have 111 existing buildings, school buildings, as well as operational facilities, but mostly school buildings, of course. In order to maintain those 111 buildings, just the ongoing capital maintenance is $20 to $30 million a year. So a bond cycle is something that we need to be on going forward to make sure that we can continue to invest in our schools and take care of our schools, as well as accommodate for future growth. Thanks to our taxpayers, we were able to pass a bond and mill levy override in 2018. The 2018 mill levy override provided for, again, this is operational ongoing expenditures, provided for counselors in all of our schools. Really wonderful timing considering what our children have been through over the last 2 years. We were also able to expand career and technical education programming. The example that I just gave of the biotechnology program that my kiddo had access to in one of our high schools, they were able to have that remodeled and get the latest technology that they needed. We still need those amazing humans, though, to deliver that education. We were able to close a few pay gaps and start to address teachers' starting salaries so that we were able to attract. Even our starting salaries now, though, have been outpaced, but not quite as much as our average teacher salary has been outpaced. In our 2018 bond, again, that bond primarily covered that deferred maintenance for a decade, so that we were able to do all of those capital projects on our buildings. We were able to expand the FPOD at Castleview High School to accommodate for some growth there. And along the career and technical educational opportunities for our students, we were able to purchase the former Wildlife Experience building, which will be used to serve many, many high school students in terms of offering them those pathways, whether it's to become a CNA, whether it's in aeronautics. We have a whole number of programs that we are really excited to be able to offer our kids. Through that bond, we were able to enhance safety and security at all of our schools. So we have had ongoing safety and security projects for the last 4 years that are now wrapping up. And we were able to address our IT and transportation needs. But as we look forward, and we always have to continue to look forward, we really need help with being able to competitively compensate our teachers relative to other school districts and our staff, so that we can hold on to the amazing people that make executing on the incredible education and incredible things our schools have to offer continue to be possible. We also need to look at those new neighborhood schools, in particular in Sterling Ranch, Crystal Valley, and in the canyons. Those are the three that are the priority for neighborhood schools. We will need to expand at least one existing middle school to accommodate for growth. And we have to look at that $20 to $30 million a year in ongoing capital needs and make sure that we're able to be proactive now rather than reactive. So those are very much the needs that our district has. As your superintendent, I could not be more proud of the amazing things that our schools do for our children and that our amazing educators and staff do for our kids. Want to make sure that we can keep them here to continue to do those great things. I always wrap up where I started, because at the end of the day, this is about what Douglas County, what we want for our kids. We want to make sure that they have an amazing place to go to school and our staff has an amazing place to work. We want to make sure that we are setting them up for success in their future right here in Douglas County, and that every school is a point of pride in our community. Here's where you can learn a little bit more. If you look at these QR codes, the one on the left is just to learn a little bit more about funding in our schools and how it works. I want to encourage everyone on this call to get involved. It is going to take all of us to work together to talk to our community about our school district and about the needs that our kids and our teachers and our staff have in order to continue to make sure that we have an amazing school district as we go into the future. With that, I would be more than happy to take any of your questions. I have Ann and Allison on the line here to help me navigate making sure that I'm able to answer every single question. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen and to dial in on a Monday at your lunchtime. So thank you very much. And ladies, I am ready for questions.
Great. We have a number of them. So we'll start with, are you receiving BEST fund money for capital expenses? If so, how much and what is it being spent on?
So there is a fund for capital expenses at the state level called the BEST grant. It's a grant, and it's usually reserved for schools and districts that are struggling financially and don't have the ability to raise tax dollars, and also have a higher percentage of free and reduced lunch or at-risk students. So usually the BEST grant is around building schools in really rural communities. We do receive some of BEST grant money, but it is very, very minimal because our percentage of free and reduced lunch students is so low, we don't generally qualify. Oh, you're on mute, Allison.
Sorry, we're chatting back here.
Oh.
We have good questions. Questions about security and plans to harden the schools, make them safer for our children against gun violence. It goes on and asks about if parents can take action or fundraise or anything like that. So love to hear your answer on that.
Great. Thank you so much for asking. So we have spent the last 4 years doing a lot of construction projects in our schools to make sure that we improve. It's that from the bond dollars, as well as the commissioners, our Douglas County commissioners contributed $10 million towards helping us enhance our safety and security and harden our buildings. So we have been spending the last 4 years doing that. We've improved our surveillance. We've done a lot of hardening work on our buildings without being too specific. We continue to evaluate what we need to make sure to keep our buildings safe and to keep our kids safe. The greatest advantage that we have in Douglas County is the incredible partnership that we have with law enforcement. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Parker PD, Castle Rock PD, Lone Tree PD, and the district and our local fire departments, we all meet together on a regular basis and coordinate everything. So safety and security in our schools is coordinated by all of those folks working together. We have school resource officers in our schools where we're working again directly with the local PD. We do joint trainings together with our kids, our staff, as well as there's a lot of joint trainings that don't necessarily involve the kids and the staff either, but are happening in our schools. We just recently did an incredible reunification training where we actually invited districts from around the state to come and join and learn. That was about a couple of months ago. So we are continuing to make sure that we are doing everything that we can, working to keep our schools as safe as possible. But the partnership with law enforcement is absolutely the #1 advantage that we have here in Douglas County.
Sorry.
I'm ready.
Superintendent King,
Yeah.
we have a question regarding Able Shepherd and the relationship between Douglas County School. And if you could please explain what your plan is with their involvement within the school district.
We do not have any kind of formal relationship with Able Shepherd. I think it's an organization that we talk to from time to time, but there is no formal relationship. We talk to everyone that we possibly can. We do a lot of work with the I Love You Guys Foundation, who work through all of the safety protocols, et cetera. But we do not have, if the question is really, do we have any plans to arm teachers in our buildings? The answer is we do not. There is no reason in Douglas County to arm our teachers. We have law enforcement very close. We have armed school resource officers on our properties. We have an incredible central security organization that works to patrol our schools and make sure they are very safe. So arming teachers or staff who aren't supposed to be armed is just not something that would be needed as an additional layer here in our district. And again, that is really because of that incredible partnership with our local police departments.
Great. We have Chris who would like, he or she, has hand up. I'm going to allow to talk. Chris, go ahead.
Sure.
You can unmute yourself now, Chris. Give Chris one more second, otherwise we'll go ahead and ask another question. So we do have a question about the educational equity policy and how, let's see here. How will DCSD protect LGBTQ and BIPOC students and employees if the equity policy changes?
That's a really great question. So first of all, the equity policy is in place. It has not been changed. What has happened is there is a resolution sitting on the books to direct the superintendent to go get feedback around the equity policy from our community. And so I will be presenting a plan in August to the Board of Education on how I plan to approach that resolution. It is my hope to go get feedback from as many groups as we can. My vision for that is understanding what people want to see happen as a result of the equity policy and what people's fears are, whatever they are. And I'd like to write all that down as feedback and then capture everything in a superintendent implementation document. I'm not sure that the equity policy needs to be changed or needs to be changed very much. And in any case, the changing of the policy is in the lane of the Board of Education. What I want to write down as superintendent is I really want to understand from our community what they want to see happen and what they don't want to see happen. We want to take care of every single child. And I do believe there is a lot of agreement around that. So what I want to understand is what people are afraid of. I'm afraid you're going to ban books. Okay, let's write it down. I'm afraid you're going to teach children that they are oppressors or victims. Okay, let's write it down. I'm afraid you're going to change the way I teach history. I'm afraid you're going to eliminate gifted and talented. Whatever it is, let's write them all down. My guess is that nobody wants 95% of those things. What we do need is some clarity. So a superintendent regulation would allow us an opportunity to be clear. For example, no, we're not going to ban books, but we might flag books for parent permission. You know, we certainly want to make sure, no, we're not going to eliminate gifted and talented. No, we're not going to change the way that we teach history. Whatever it is, let's write it all down, get the feedback, write it all down, and be super clear. And as I said, my guess is 95% of us fall within where we don't want to do any of those things. Once we are able to put that together for the board, then the board can decide if they're okay with the superintendent interpretation and regulation, or if they feel they might further need to clarify a line or two. I do not personally see any kind of wholesale change to the equity policy. And I really do believe that we want to take care of each and every child in our schools, no matter what their circumstances are, what their background is, how they identify. They are all our babies to take care of, and we need to make sure that they feel welcome and that they belong in our schools. So thank you for that question.
Our next question is regarding pre-COVID bus routes. Do we have a plan to return to them?
I really appreciate the question on transportation. Transportation is really hard right now. I'm absolutely going to level with you. It's really, really challenging. The challenge that we're having in transportation is the same challenge that every school district in the metro area is having in transportation, which is a massive labor shortage. So we finally have enough buses, but we don't have enough drivers. And it isn't just the drivers, we don't have enough drivers, and we don't have enough of the educational assistants that are required for transporting our students with special needs. Without enough drivers, it is really, really hard for us to maintain all of the routes that we currently have. It is partially a competitive pay problem, but we did just recently raise our bus driver pay, and so did every other school district. The crux of the matter is truly, truly a labor shortage. Until the labor shortage changes, we are going to continue to have a hard time maintaining all of our routes. So I would love to tell you that I can wave a magic wand and make us bring back all of our general education routes, but without enough bus drivers to drive those buses, I can't make that promise. We will continue to struggle with this issue. We will continue to do the absolute best that we can within our power. As eventually the labor shortage will get resolved and it will get better. Districts across the metro area are cutting routes. We're trying to avoid cutting routes as much as we can, but we are also trying to be as efficient as we can so that we can do it, so we can manage all of our routes. What's really hard is if we have 130 routes and on any given day we only have 120 bus drivers, we have really hard decisions to make. I've had the director of transportation out driving a bus route. So it's just an incredible challenge that is around primarily the labor shortage. We will continue to navigate it as best we can and communicate with families as best we can. But I'm not going to be able to promise that we can wave a magic wand and make this challenge go away. We will continue to deal with this challenge. I will of course put in a plug that if you know anyone who would have any interest in being a bus driver in our school district, please send them our way because we need them. It's actually a really neat opportunity to just get to know lots and lots of kids. But that is our situation in transportation. It is not an easy one. We have really dug into it. I personally have dug into a lot of the details to do as much creative problem solving as we can, and we will continue to do that.
This feels a little bit related, but how can we be sure that additional funding will go to educators and specialists in the classroom and not to administration and other staff?
So the additional funding will go towards making sure that our pay is competitive pretty much across the board. We of course will focus on our educators and our support staff. But I'm going to tell you, we are also struggling to pay assistant principals and principals competitively as well. And leadership matters in our schools. So our competitive challenge is across the board in our district. We are struggling to hold on to everybody. But certainly the vast majority of people in our district are our educators and our support staff. And it is our priority to put them in a better competitive position first. But please understand that we are struggling on the leadership side as well. It's a huge struggle. In terms of administration in general, we get asked a lot about, are you very heavy administratively? What does that look like? Our district administrators are also well under market, just like everybody else is, and extremely understaffed, just like everyone else is. So I'll give you an example. Douglas County School District's Human Resources Department employs 23 professionals in order to address the needs of our 8,600 employees. That's one human resources professional for every 370 employees. The private industry, the standard is 1 to 50, which is very nice. We'll never get anywhere around that. Our other school districts are running anywhere from 1 to 250 to 1 to 100. So DPS, for example, has 179 human resources professionals. And again, we've got 23. So our central departments are incredibly lean. I don't want anybody to leave with this impression that there's all this bloated central administration. When I was interim superintendent from 2016 to 2018, we cut $24 million in ongoing costs in central administration. We have an incredibly lean central administration. But competitive pay is a challenge across our district. But of course, the focus should be on our educators and our support staff, but leadership does matter too. I hope that helps.
All right, Superintendent Kane, polling has shown low numbers in support of the MLO. Being the 6th richest county in the country, can you explain why we are so behind in supporting our schools and staff?
So really, truly, it is around the mill levy override. Because again, us being the wealthiest county may help us collect more school-related local property taxes, but it only means that the state fills in less. The mill levy override is the only place that we have to override the size of our bucket, essentially. And with our mill levy override sitting at 12%, it's just not quite enough. Now it's complicated. People ask me all the time, why don't taxpayers in Douglas County support our schools more? I don't think that's the issue. I think they don't understand how the school funding works differently. It makes perfect sense to them that our county is prospering, our libraries are prospering, the other municipalities are prospering. What is the school district doing with all of that money? It's very counterintuitive that when we get more locally, we get less from this state. In terms of supporting a mill levy override, that's going to take us talking to our taxpayers as much as we possibly can to help them understand how the funding actually works, where the money is going, and what our needs are in terms of being able to pay more competitively. The other thing I will say about Douglas County, our tax structure is such, because we're a newer county in terms of the houses, et cetera, many of our taxpayers are paying more to water districts and metro districts than we're seeing in other areas of the state. So we also have complicated property taxes that aren't quite the same as other areas of the state. So it's a complicated answer, but I think if we really get out there and talk to our taxpayers and help them understand how all of this works and why it is that we're struggling, we will see a lot more support.
We have Marie Kay, who has unmuted herself and has a question.
Great. Yes, Marie, I can hear you.
Thank you. Ms. Kane, first of all, thanks so much. I really applaud your plan to reach out to the community. I think you've got a very tough job ahead of you here. And I have a tough question for you, but please hear me out, because this is something that is on the minds of thousands of people in this county.
Okay.
How can you assure me that the money for the MLO is going to be used responsibly? The 4 new board members continue to abuse their positions for political partisan gain, and they still have not. They've refused to share what the new plan for the district is. They're aligning themselves with a political party that wants to defund public schools, bring religion into public schools, arm teachers, demean the LGBT community, and ignore inequities for minority groups. And these majority board members are going out of their way to publicly align the school district with this political party. How can I have confidence that this money is going to go to the actual needs and wishes of the majority of the community and not toward a conservative party playbook? Because I understand how this all works, but I don't have confidence that it's going to be carried out the right way.
So I really appreciate the question. And a lot of our community, and in 2018, a lot of our community were asking very similar questions. How do I know that I can trust that the money is going where you're saying it's going to go? And how do I know I can trust the board, whatever board happens to be in place? So I will tell you a couple of things. One, this funding is not about the Board of Education or a Board of Education. The funding is about our staff and our students and our district. The funding is ongoing. It will outlast any given Board of Education. I think we have a couple of advantages though right now. One is that we have a representative board. So for everyone in our community, there is probably someone on the board that you trust, which I think is incredibly helpful, because working with the someone or the someones on the board that you trust to ask them these questions about where the money will be spent, I think is really helpful. There are a lot of checks and balances built into our school district in terms of the financials. So let me talk about that for just a moment. The Board of Education has a number of committees. They have the Fiscal Oversight Committee. That is a citizen committee that studies the financials of the district and provides recommendations to the Board of Education. The Long Range Planning Committee on the growth and enrollment side looks at the state of the district, what growth is coming, what enrollment expectations are going forward, the maintenance of our buildings, and provides recommendations to the Board of Education. The Mill Bond Oversight Committee is a committee that was actually put in place to oversee the spending of the bond and MLO money. So that Bond Mill Oversight Committee looks at the ballot questions and looks at the plan for the spending and compares it to the actual spending as it's coming through, and reports out to the Board of Education and to the public. So those committees are all citizen committees. They all have openings, by the way. So if anyone on this call would be interested in joining one of those committees to become part of this process, I would encourage you to go to our website and look into that. Those committees help, I think, bring a lot of checks and balances. At the end of the day, the ballot questions will box the district in as far as how the money should be spent. On the compensation side, it will be easy to see that it's being invested in our teacher compensation structure and exactly how much, as well as what's being invested in support staff compensation. On the bond side, it will be easy to hold the district accountable for, you said you were going to build an elementary school in Sterling Ranch. And I do want to be really clear on the builds of the new schools. I've had a couple of people ask me, well, how do we know they're not going to use that money to build a charter school, for example, in these communities? We are absolutely speaking of traditional public neighborhood schools that need to be built in these communities. Charter schools, to the extent that they build, they have to sort themselves out in terms of creating the debt structure to do that and paying that debt structure off. That isn't done through a school district bond. So we are talking about our traditional public neighborhood schools to anchor those communities, whether it's Sterling Ranch, Crystal Valley, or the Canyons. So I hope all of that information is helpful as far as accountability. But I would say that the benefits of this funding last well beyond any currently sitting leadership structure or Board of Education.
Thank you.
I do
we have a
appreciate the
question.
candid question.
When you
Maria.
receive donated land to use for new schools and it's decided that you can't use the land, what's the process for selling that land? For example, is it to put a formal bid and can anyone purchase it? And then also, what is the process for deciding how those funds are dispersed or used?
Okay, if I got the question right, it's how do we sell land if necessary, and how do those funds get used? So there is a process it starts with the Long Range Planning Committee in declaring a piece of land surplus. In other words, the district will have no use for this land in the future. We do have to be very, very thoughtful before giving up land, because that is something you cannot get back. It's one of the reasons why our master capital plan looks out so far, because what we don't want to do is end up in a situation where we need to build an elementary school, but 10 years ago we sold the land to build that elementary school, and now it's long since become whatever, and now we have nowhere to put a school. So you have to be really careful around land. The Long Range Planning Committee declares land surplus, so that's kind of the first step. The Board of Education approves that land's declaration as surplus. And then we have the ability to sell that land, put it on the market, whatever. We've recently done that with Topher and Sweetwater, 2 sites that went towards parks in Highlands Ranch. Whatever money we raise from the sale of land does go into a capital construction fund so that it will be used on capital improvement, maintenance, whatever for our facilities, because it is capital dollars. There is sort of, I think, this impression that we can solve all our problems by selling all of our land. But remember, when we sell a piece of land, it's, $5 million or whatever, or if we're lucky, or $2 million one time. It does not help us pay more competitively, does not help us with ongoing operation costs, but it will help us with future capital investments. So that's a little how the land side works. We do have some surplus land. We do not have a lot of surplus land. And just in terms of, we have to be really careful not to too much we don't want to put the district in 10 or 20 years in a terrible situation by just getting rid of all the land. So we have to be really, really strategic and really careful. And that's how that citizens committee is really helps us look into all of that. I appreciate the question.
You may have touched on this, so apologies, but also asking about the existing buildings, are all of our facilities and buildings. Do we really need each other? Have they been assessed? And can we sell any of them?
Well, we are constantly assessing, because buildings can be declared as surplus as well. And so we are always assessing the need for buildings. You'll probably hear a little bit more about that in our August meetings. Now, if we're talking specifically about schools, because of course, most of those 111 buildings are schools, we do have declining enrollment in areas in Highlands Ranch. And unfortunately, we can't just pick up an elementary school from the middle of Highlands Ranch and plop it down in the canyons. If we could, everything would be so much easier, but that's not how that works. We do plan to engage in a process with the Highlands Ranch community over the next year to really talk about what our enrollment projections are and what our enrollment situations are in Highlands Ranch and what our options are, and how we as a community can work together to decide what the best future is for the Highlands Ranch community in terms of their school enrollment, because we are seeing continually declining enrollment in Highlands Ranch as that community ages out. And we need to engage in a process to make sure that we are continuing to keep our operational dollars as efficient as possible, keep us flexible for the future. Littleton Public Schools had to repurpose a couple of elementary schools, and 5 years later, they're finding them repurposing them as elementary schools. So we also have to really look into the future and do that planning really effectively, do it with our staff, with our community, so that we're not making last minute emergency decisions. We need to just be proactive and have a plan going out so everyone knows what to expect in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years. Those discussions all need to happen as well.
Next question, how can we build trust within the older populations of Douglas County that they should vote for the MLO bond?
So a lot of my outreach over this summer is really reaching out to the 70%. I have a presentation at Windcrest, I believe, scheduled later this week, and many others where I'm trying to get out to talk to our empty nesters and our senior citizens, not like me, but really getting out to our community that are in that 70% that don't have kids in school. And the truth is, people built school for their kids. Many of them grew, they like me, they raised their children here in Douglas County. And it was the taxpayer, the 70% before them, that built the schools for those children. Building and investing in schools in your community is perpetual. Someday, long from now, I hope to have grandchildren in our schools, and I want to invest in that. Also, even as people who don't necessarily have kids going into our schools, we all have businesses or are part of business here in Douglas County or here locally, and it's in our best interest to make sure that our kids come out of their K-12 journey prepared for success, prepared to come work at the companies that our citizens here in Douglas County own or work for. So it really is truly in all of our best interests. So continuing to talk to our citizens about that is really important. But getting out to the 70% is significantly important, and we can't do it alone. We need your help. So for the folks on this call, if you are interested in volunteering and helping us with our outreach, please grab that QR code on the right of your screen. We really do need all the help we can get. We're getting our helpers extremely organized as advocates to really be able to get out and talk to our citizens.
We have a question from Trisha.
Mm-hmm.
Trisha, you can unmute now.
Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can, Trisha. Go right ahead.
Awesome. Hi, thank you, Erin. So my question is regarding, as far as funding goes, to the change in the food system as far as plant-based diets being offered to our children without a medical clearance, I guess you could say. My children are both obviously go to Douglas County, and we had to have medical clearance in order to eat plant-based. And there's a lot of shift going on throughout the nation, obviously, with that. So I was wondering if any funding will be provided towards that as well.
Not as part of this, mill levy override. We really do have to focus on making sure that we hold on to the amazing people that we have. But I would like to ask you to give your feedback to our nutrition services folks on, kind of what feedback you have. Our nutrition services do follow the national standards as far as what they're offering to our children in K through 8. Our high schools operate just a little bit differently, but I know they would greatly appreciate feedback from their citizens. They're trying very hard to make sure they offer healthy meals. It's been really hard during COVID, but pre-COVID, our kids always had the opportunity to access whole fruits and vegetables through basically a bar, like a salad bar, but whole fruits and vegetables at every single meal. Unfortunately, a lot of that got harder with COVID in terms of the salad bar type style and all of that. So I know they'll be moving back to wanting to make sure that we're offering as many whole fruits and vegetables as possible. So again, I would encourage you to reach out to our nutrition services folks. And if you need help with contact information, maybe just leave your contact in our chat and someone will get back to you. Appreciate the question.
Thank you. Several questions about anything we're hearing or you're hearing from current staff here at DCSD, anything being done to address their concerns, and then also a lot of questions about retaining and attracting employees.
So retaining and attracting employees is something that is very much on my mind. As of today, our licensed turnover is sitting at about 12%. This time last year, it was about 11%. So, we're doing okay. We did put in place at the last board meeting, we announced a retention payment. This is one time, so it's not ongoing because we are not able to solve this problem on an ongoing basis without a mill levy override. But we did offer a one-time retention payment to our staff of $2,000 for full-time staff, whether you're a teacher or a custodian. And anecdotally, we're hearing that that's helping a lot. Our overall turnover is so far about what it was last year. So that's good. We're watching that very, very carefully. In terms of working with the staff, I was able to visit 45 schools in my first 6 weeks before, we lost them all for the summer. And to talk to many, 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 many teachers and staff. I will continue to do that as soon as schools get back in. I will continue to do that. We're going to work on culture in our district, on norms of how we're going to treat each other, how I'm going to model that from the top, how my staff is going to model that, how we're going to treat each other and take care of each other. And I think our staff needs to see me and their leadership out here fighting for their compensation. And I will absolutely be doing that. And I will continue to be doing that, because the amazing people that do the things for our kids are what make all of this possible.
Thank you. Couple questions about MLO. I'm going to kind of run them together.
Okay.
One is a follow-up. What things related to the MLO does the current BOE have the power to change or veto? And then secondly, somebody was asking about guaranteeing that the MLO money doesn't go up to the state and then get dispersed elsewhere. If you can clarify.
Oh no, I'm
that.
really glad for that question. All right, let me take the second part first, and then Allison, if I forget the first part, I may have you remind me. All right, so let's talk about the second part. So if I jump back to the bucket for just a minute, because they're probably going to get sick of seeing the bucket, but it is just the best way to visually illustrate how this works. So again, when school taxes, our property taxes that go to schools are collected, and we collect more, the state fills in less. The mill levy override is the exception to this. Every penny collected in mill levy override and every penny collected in our local property taxes comes to us as well. It's just the state amount varies based on how much we're collecting from our property taxes. The mill levy override does not impact what the state puts in the bucket. So it really is over and above the bucket. And so no, our mill levy override dollars are not in any way going to the state or meaning that the state puts in less. Our mill levy override dollars really are over and above the bucket. So any mill levy override dollars that we receive help us get help us start to catch up competitively with our peers who are collecting more mill levy override dollars. It does not change how much the state contributes. The thing that changes how much the state contributes is how much we collect in the school property taxes. So I hope that helps explain that one. Allison, can you remind me of the first part one more time? You're on mute, yeah.
We have questions about what's the plan if MLO and or bond do not pass?
All right, so the MLO, first of all, whether or not a bond MLO is put on the ballot is up to the Board of Education. They will make that final decision on August 23rd. The reason they wait so long to make that final decision about if something will go on the ballot is as soon as they decide to put something on the ballot, advocating for the bond MLO is turned over to a campaign committee, and staff can't be out there advocating anymore. So they'll wait as long as they can so that we can be out talking to and educating our community as long as we possibly can. I think there was a question about, can they veto? They actually, the Board of Education is the one who votes to put a bond MLO on the ballot. Should a bond MLO not be successful, be put on the ballot and not be successful, I can't speak to what the Board of Education would do, but I imagine that they would put it on the ballot again, because this is critical to our school district. And we would continue to advocate as hard as we are advocating right now. It is my hope, of course, that we could put something on the ballot and be successful in 22. That if we need to continue this education effort into 23, then that's absolutely what we'll do, because this funding is critical to our kids and to our teachers. Now, if it doesn't pass, let's say it doesn't pass in 22, let's say it doesn't pass in 23. Boy, I hope that's not the case, but if that's true, what would we do? On the ongoing revenue side, the only way without a mill levy override that we can pay our teachers and staff more competitively is to have fewer teachers and staff. That's it. So we would have to look at a lot of cuts in order to be able to try to be a little bit more competitive, because we have to hold on to our folks. We would continue to look at some creative strategies that are sort of one-time stopgap strategies, such as a one-time retention, that kind of thing. You know, the world will not come to an end, but we will have to make some really hard decisions in terms of programming and in terms of class sizes and all of those things in order to work on making sure that we can retain our staff and our support staff. So that's on the ongoing side. On the bond side, if we are not able to receive a bond in the next couple of years, we do have to accommodate growth. We just have to. We have done that in the past with mobiles at our overcrowded schools. That is not a solution that I love for a lot of reasons, some of which include safety, but for a lot of reasons. So, but we could look at mobiles for our overcrowded schools. We could also look at working with charter schools so that they can strategically, replicate or whatever, so that we can absorb some of that growth. But again, I think it's so critical for our communities to have that anchor traditional neighborhood school first. So, but those are some options that we have should we not be able to pass additional funding.
So it is 1 p.m. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions and answers. My personal email for the school district has been included in the chat. Thank you for all the wonderful questions everyone has provided. If we have not answered your question, please feel free to email me directly, and we will do our very best to get an answer for you right away.
Thank you, Anne. And I would just like to, first of all, the fact that you are on this call tells me that you are passionate about our school district and our kids. And thank you. Thank you for taking your personal time to hear about our school district and our kids. Please consider getting involved and helping us. You can see that, again, that QR code on this final page. If you do have any questions, please reach out to Anne or Allison, or you are certainly welcome to reach out to me. I do answer my emails. I try to answer every single one. I'm not always super fast, depending on how many I have, but I do my absolute best. There is a board meeting tomorrow on June 21st. You can watch all of our board meetings live on YouTube, where you can hear about our final budget for the 22-23 school year, as well as the board will be making decisions on 2 charter school replication applications. Thank you again for joining us. I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm really grateful to your dedication for our kids and for our wonderful staff. So thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic afternoon.